It's story time. The story begins. The words enter your mind. Neurons fire away deep into Imagination Central. There, any adventure can play out. Waves of blooming wildflowers roll in a light breeze. Butterflies flutter across the field, drifting up into the sky on a bright summer morning. You build a Persian palace from shadowy memories. Inside, sitting on his ottoman in flowing silk robes, a sultan speaks to his emissary, his eyes drawn thin as he issues a challenge to his people to bring him a riddle he cannot solve. You enter Storyland. Now you turn your heightened focus to today's storyteller.
I'm Sherry Lousberg, and I'm with the Longmont Library Spellbinders group. My first story I got from a book called Ready to Tell Tales by David Holt and Bill Mooney. And the title of the story is The Freedom Bird. And it is said that this story was told when Thailand was at war, and it was told to give the people hope through the war. A freedom bird. One day, a hunter was walking through the woods when he heard a bird singing a very strange song. Na, 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 na. So he walked deeper into the woods, and he came to a tall tree. And when he looked up into the tree, he saw the most beautiful golden bird he had ever seen. And he said to that bird, "Why does such a beautiful bird make such an awful noise?" And the bird looked down at him and he said, "Na, na, 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 na." And the hunter said, "If you keep making that awful noise, I'm going to have to shoot you." And the bird said, "Na, na, 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 na." So the hunter took an arrow and he put it in his bow and he shot at the bird, but he missed. And the bird looked down and said, "Na, na, 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 na." So the hunter took another arrow out, put it in his bow, aimed carefully, and shot him right through the bird's heart. And as it started to fall, he caught it in a sack, and he cinched the sack and threw it over his shoulder and started home. But from deep inside that sack, he heard, So he took that bird home, and he put it on his kitchen table, and he pulled out all the feathers. But when he turned to get a knife, he heard, "Brr, brr, 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 brr." So he got his knife, and he chopped up that bird into 100 pieces. And he scooped up those pieces, and he dropped them in a pot of boiling water. And from the boiling water, he heard, "Bloop, bloop, 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 bloop." Well, now he's getting very frustrated. So he took that pot of boiling water, and he took it outside, and he dumped it in a hole that was deeper than he was tall, and he filled it all up, and patted it all down. And what did he hear? So now he's really getting angry. He is furious. Gets his shovel. He digs up all 100 pieces of that bird, and he takes them and puts them in a wooden box puts a rock on top and wraps it all up with a rope. And he took that box and he threw it out in the river, and it sank to the bottom. And he listened, and he listened, and he listened, and he didn't hear anything. So with a big sigh, he walked back to his hut. But the rope on the box broke, and the box floated to the top of the river, and it floated down the river for about 3 days. And finally it came to a place where children were playing on the bank. And of course, you know how children are. They're so curious. So they waded out into the river and they pulled that box up on the beach, and they began to open it, and out flew 100 golden birds, all singing, "Na, na, 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 na." About a year later, the same hunter was in the same woods. He heard the same noise coming from the same tree, and when he looked up, there were 100 golden birds up there, and they were all singing, "Na, na, 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 na." And he looked up and he said, "Oh, now I know who you are. You are the freedom bird, for you cannot be killed." The end. I like the folk tales. I like to tell the story to the children because they repeat na, 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 na. Sometimes we talk about the fact that when I was a kid, that was the way you teased people, na, 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 na. And I just like folk tales. I just find them fascinating and fun, and that has a lot of character in it. My second story was compiled by a woman named Catherine Fairley, and it is called Turkey Dressing, a Civil War Legend. Miss Kitty lived in South Carolina during the Civil War. All the menfolk had gone off to fight against the Union Army. So Miss Kitty and her very elderly servant, Carrie, were the only ones left to take care of the small farm. The Union soldiers had come through 2 times, and they'd taken everything of value, including all the livestock. So the only thing the 2 women could do was to raise a few vegetables to subsist on. But Carrie and Miss Kitty had cleverly hidden 4 turkeys. They kept them in the parlor. They fed them with whatever they could find, and then they let them out at night to peck. You see, before the Civil War, Miss Kitty had been famous for her plump and juicy turkeys. So these were kind of her babies. And the women took such good care of these turkeys, by the end of the war, there were 13 turkeys. Well, when it came to be Thanksgiving time, the war was over. And Miss Kitty and Carrie decided they should roast one of those turkeys. And they invited all of the neighbors to come along because nobody in that part of the country had turkeys. So the women cooked all day long, and the neighbors came and brought whatever they could contribute. They had some yams, and they had some green beans, and they had cornbread, and one neighbor brought her very special dish, and it was cherries soaked in wine. So they had a wonderful dinner. The turkey was delicious. The food was wonderful. And they really enjoyed celebrating the fact that the war was over. When all the company was gone, Miss Kitty and Carrie cleaned up and threw all of the scraps to the turkeys, including the cherry pits. Well, the next morning, Carrie came running in. Miss Kitty, Miss Kitty, all them turkeys is dead. Sure enough, all the turkeys were laying around the yard, stiff as a board. They must have choked on the cherry pits. Well, of course, Miss Kitty, she was devastated, but what could she do? She did know that she could trade all those turkeys to her neighbors for something. But one thing that Miss Kitty was not willing to do was to give up the feathers, because they could make pillows and comforters and feather dusters. She and Carrie plucked all the feathers off of those turkeys, and then she went off to talk to the neighbors about trading. Well, when she came home, Carrie was in a big tizzy. Miss Kitty, Miss Kitty, them turkeys weren't dead. They were dead drunk from the cherries. Well, sure enough, when they went out in the yard, there were 12 birds, naked as babies, wobbling all over the yard, gurgling, gurg, gurg. Miss Kitty wasn't about to have those turkeys freeze to death. So they went racing up to the attic and dug through everything until they found some children's sizes and clothes. And they took them down and wrapped those turkeys in mufflers and shawls and sweaters and jackets and even hats. That was a real odd sight to see. But those turkeys survived the winter, just like they had survived the war. Miss Kitty and Carrie were really proud of how they had saved the turkeys, and soon all the neighbors knew about it. And that, my friends, is how the fine old American tradition started. Turkey dressing. The end. Oh my, it's just fun to go into the classroom and watch their eyes. They love to see me come, and that's a joy. You know, I taught for a lot of years, and sometimes it wasn't a joy, but they love, and they wrote me letters at the end of the year, and a lot of them told specific stories they loved, and it's just fun. I did find if I don't do a good job of it, they get real antsy, so I found that's my fault if they get antsy, but no, it's just fun to be in the classroom.